this is it. After all the preparations we've done to get ready for the celebration of Christmas, it's done. We're now at the point where we're going to celebrate the birth of the Messiah, the birth of Jesus. Jesus is coming into the world out of love for us. And I don't know that there's ever been a time that we've needed the message of Christmas, this message of Jesus is stepping into our story more than we do now. Now, you may not realize this, but depending on what time you go to Mass determines which reading you're going to hear. There's actually 4 different sets of readings for Christmas Mass. The gospel you'd hear on Christmas Eve, it's the gospel from the beginning of Matthew that tells the story of Jesus' family tree. And I have to admit, for a long time when I went to Christmas Eve Mass, I found it odd that we're reading this long list of names that I didn't recognize, that I didn't understand. When there's so much more to choose from, why go there? Well, if you take any kind of a look at the Old Testament, you start to realize just what a mess all these ancestors of Jesus really are. Yeah, sure, there's some really heroic characters, people who did really faithful and courageous things. But there's also some great sinners in there. And what we learn is that in the midst of the heroes and the sinners, God stays faithful. Well, then, if you go to midnight Mass, you hear probably the more famous reading, the one that's got the census and Mary and Joseph traveling to Jerusalem, and there's no room at the inn, and Jesus is born in a barn. And you hear the announcement of the angels to the shepherds saying, come and see what God has done. It's worth considering what Jesus was born into. It's not just that he was born into a messy family. He was literally born into a mess, into a stable where animals live. Move ahead to the Mass that comes at dawn, and you hear the continuation of that reading where the shepherds actually show up. Well, you'd think, if somebody this important was going to be born, that you'd find important people to come and visit him. And very few, either back then or even today, would look and say, well, hey, shepherds are those really important people. These are commoners. Uneducated, not very sophisticated, not terribly religious, and yet they're the first ones to show up to offer homage to the King. And if you go on Christmas Day later on, you hear from the beginning of the Gospel of John, and right smack in the middle of that passage, you hear the verse that explains all the Gospels that we could hear at Christmas. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. It's a good and an important lesson to us that God isn't afraid of the dark. Not the dark in our world, not the dark in our hearts. God is not afraid of the messes we make of our own lives and the messes we make of our own souls. God is not afraid. He comes into it all. And so in this year, when we celebrate the strangest of Christmases, just remember, as God was there in that family you probably never would have picked to be the line of Jesus, as God was there in that messy stable, as God was encountered by those commoners, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not and will not overcome it.